that's a bad sign, rather than vice versa. So it could happen that we do develop a very bifurcated culture. There will obviously be the glue of sort of American consumer culture, popular culture together, but I think we are going to start looking more like Mexico, and that's something that, again, is something that's off limits to be spoken about. Sir?
I was surprised to hear you being so light on the business community, since the core of open borders is cheap labor. The business community is addicted, like junkies, to cheap labor.
Right.
The common practice on construction sites in Los Angeles is on the first day of hiring to hire 15 people and then fire at least 10 of them within the first week to put the fear of God in the rest of the workers there, so that they are crudely exploited by the business community. This is the reason for most of this. Why do people avoid it? Why are you avoiding this issue?
Well, I don't know if I'm avoiding it.
You said it was, you were
But we
right.
need enforcement. I mean, this is one thing that the Bush administration has started to do in a very small way. I mean, the number of there's hundreds of thousands of employers who are violating the law. Several years ago, there were 3 employers who were issued fine notices. Now we're up to several hundred. It's a pathetic amount, but let's acknowledge it's an increase of several hundred. And you know what? Again, like the attrition strategy of illegal aliens self-deporting, it doesn't take a massive dragnet to make employers start to pay attention. So I think if we could continue with what we're doing now, which is to say actually there is a risk that you will be detected. I think what Chertoff is doing now with requiring no match letter enforcement, and again, the courts are trying to strike this down, this will have an effect.
But how do you compete with a meat cutter in Iowa who made $17 an hour 10 years ago and an $8 worker now who fills the factories? You can't stop that. There's just too much money in it. You know, the core reason why South went to war, which people don't really understand, was there was so much money in slavery. Cotton was the biggest commodity in the world at that point. There were huge fortunes made. The business community perceives this as necessary for its survival. In a competitive world where we're competing against Chinese workers, we have to have low-class, low-skill, cheap $8 an hour workers in this country. It's as simple as that.
Well, you know, they're trying to scare us that way, and certainly we've heard, you know, we're all going to not be able to eat fruits and vegetables if the Bush administration continues with the no match policy. And they're calling our bluff. And I say, let's see what happens. And, you know, prices will go up, but in something like agriculture, there's other countries that do not have this endless supply of unskilled labor that have mechanized. There's a lot of agricultural mechanization that is going on elsewhere, these just fantastic machines for picking grapes, letting them dry on the vine and pick them, that was starting to happen here in the 60s when the Bracero program ended, and then when we got, once again, the influx coming in with the 65 bill, that effort of innovation stopped. So, you know, I think you're right, they have an interest in it, but if we are able to both control the borders, but most important is immigration enforcement in the interior of the country. So employers do face a risk. They don't want to take on that cost either. So it's something to, again, we're at the start of this process. We've had moribund immigration laws on the books since 1986. We've had, you know what, at most a year of enforcement, starting out at a trickle, but it's already making them very worried. So if we were to continue, I think we might see something quite different. Sir?
It simply won't stop the employment of illegals. For 15 years, I manufactured furniture. 99 and 9/10 of my employees over those years, and it had to be thousands, were illegal. And during that time, all of my major competitors were raided multiple times. I never for a moment thought of not employing illegals because I chose to stay in business. The enforcement that was used was raiding factories back in those days, because that was about 20 years ago. 72 through 85, 86. The only thing that has a chance of working is where you don't count on raids or enforcement by undermanned agencies. They simply have no power to go to solve the problem. At least from my experience and observation, the only thing it does is are something that's controlled by a telephone or a computer, and that's identification cards with biometric measures. This kind of thing, because you need a relatively foolproof identification card, and where enforcement can be done electronically. That's the only thing that stands a chance. Uneven enforcement is only hurts the people who don't cheat. So the only way you can have relatively even enforcement and really make that dragnet work is the biometric card. And I'm wondering, do we have a chance of anything like that being implemented going forward from your perspective?
You know, that everybody starts raising this alarm about a national ID card, which we sort of have one already with driver's licenses. You know, I don't, for me, the benefits so far outweigh this hypothetical privacy risk that it's an obvious solution to a lot of problems. And whether businesses don't want it because they, again, realize that it would be cut off, that's right, the loopholes. But you know, it's being pushed now, whether it will run out of steam, it well may. I mean, there's just a huge amount of inertia, obviously, with the status quo. But I think possibly combined with sort of a terrorism argument, it is possible. It hasn't been derailed yet. You know, Chertoff is trying to push it forward. So, you know, if we were to get, and I'm not pushing Romney here, but he's the only person I see in the whole field that seems to be relatively sincere at the moment, at least, about caring about the borders. You know, I can see him pushing that forward.
A political question. It seems like there's, if you look at it on a class basis, there's a group of people who win with the status quo and a group of people who lose with the status quo. However, our position seems to be tied with the winners when in reality we're on the side of the underdogs. How do we change that perception politically?
Well, you know, the people that are hurt by low-class, low-wage, low-skilled illegal alien immigration is blacks and other Hispanics, and they don't have that much political clout. But it would be nice if that was an issue that the Republicans took up. You know, for once, it gives them the supporting the underdog role. But I guess they've just been listening too much to Michael Gerson and Peter Wehner that say, no, they've got this huge voting bloc coming up. And so they're sacrificing their principles for what they perceive as raw partisan advantage. I think they're misperceiving it. But yeah, it would be nice to stick up for the American worker. Now there's the counter argument, which is that, well, the benefits of cheaper goods are spread throughout the economy, and so a lot of people, not just the elites, are benefiting from that. So the economics gets a little bit complicated where you have, you know, a small percentage of people hurt and then seemingly a lot of people advantaged. But to the extent that, you know, people feel that we still have an obligation to do as much as we can to open up opportunities to blacks,